Did you understand that? Pretty confusing and challenging for us. There's no question that Jesus is a figure to be reckoned with. He heals people of all manner of diseases. He teaches with such authority that listeners immediately recognize something new and different. They may not understand it always, but there's something compelling about him and what he has to say. Crowds flock to him. So I think a logical question is, what's going on with this impressive, this imposing person? Where does the power come from that enables him to perform the mighty works that he does? Is he one of those crazed characters who are going to spring up and then fade away very quickly? Some expression of the superhuman must be present in him, but what is it? How do we read him? How do we understand him? Finally, who is family? And what does it mean to be related to Jesus? These are questions, I think, that emerge from this kind of intriguing text. And they help to remind us that being there does not remove the ambiguity nor lessen the risk of decision. So these questions surface in this relatively carefully constructed story, filled with suspense as well as conflict. The narrator tells us that Jesus' family is anxious about what is happening with him. And they come into a crowd-filled setting to restrain him. But then we're left hanging as to what they said and how Jesus responded, while the focus shifts to the charges against Jesus brought by scribes from Jerusalem. Let's focus on his family and on family. First, there are different translations in that opening verse 21. One translation is that they think that Jesus is mentally deranged. And this motivates them to seize or restrain him. Other translations of the Greek suggest that his relatives themselves have concluded he's obsessed. Either way, the family has come to do what we would call these days an intervention. And it's probably a source of embarrassment for them. Is this the boy that we brought up? He's embarrassing us. So one can only imagine their anxiety and their concern for Jesus' well-being, but also concern for the family name. What might we translate today these kinds of questions? And the questions maybe that you get asked. You're still going to church? What's that about? How can you be a Catholic today and they trot out different things that get in the way for them in terms of being Catholic? Sex abuse crisis, the cover-up, the role of women, sexual issues in the church, teachings about those. So we get the same thing, don't we? The narrator of this gospel story makes abundantly clear that when the family members arrive, they're really the outsiders. There's no room for them inside. And they don't have the power of that paralytic whose friends cut a hole in the roof and they entered to be the insiders. So they don't even get to talk to Jesus, but have to communicate from the edge of the crowd. His relatives are the outsiders in that sense. And they have to pass along through the crowd to tell Jesus what they're worried about. When Jesus speaks, he addresses not his relatives, but the insiders, those gathered about him in this house. But Jesus' response is really kind of revolutionary for us. On the one hand, it relativizes the natural family, connection so cherished in the Jewish context and probably our own. It threatens to undermine the basic core of social stability and thereby poses an enormous risk. On the other hand, it establishes a new family, a new way of being family, bound together not by blood, but by the doing of God's will. It provides a different basis for solidarity. In the mind of Jesus, the real community, the real family, is created by obedience, by walking in the footsteps of Jesus, according to his values, according to his concerns. So the impulse might be to put people into two categories: real family, false family, good persons, bad persons, real believers and false believers. It might even be within our own family. Even though Jesus doesn't equivocate in this passage about who are real family to him, we need to see this challenging gospel in the context of Jesus' whole life. Family wasn't easy for him either. Think about Peter and how he continued to be in relationship with Peter, who was always tripping over himself. Or think of James and John, who were elbowing people to get out of the way so they could be on his right side and on his left side. Or think of Thomas, whose doubting of Jesus had room for. So Jesus had to struggle with this too, just like us. The focus for Jesus is establishing the kingdom, and everyone is welcome. This is what drove him. This is also what drove people to him. His inclusivity, his welcome to all. Jesus' final word is, in that sense, is that Jesus has room for all, including us. And I think the challenge for us then is, do we have room for all?